To put it in a positive way, the British Prime Minister is the first G7 head of government to travel to Kiev. What he's covering up is his shameful treatment of war refugees. The Embassy of Ukraine in London posted a photo on Twitter on Saturday afternoon with the caption "Surprise." The photo showed Boris Johnson and Volodymyr Zelensky sitting at a table in Kiev. In fact, the British Prime Minister was the first G7 leader to visit Ukraine since the war began, in a total surprise. Johnson was expected back in London on Sunday, while videos were posted on social media by Ukrainian journalists of Johnson walking around in Kiev with President Zelensky, accompanied by heavily armed soldiers. He was greeted warmly by Ukrainian citizens. A woman gave him a kind of a vase. A man calls out, "Thank you, Boris," in Ukrainian, and Johnson shakes his hand. There are warm-hearted images that go around the world. The version that the United Kingdom is the leading nation in aid to Ukraine was broadcast in almost every British medium on Sunday. It's been like this for weeks. Hardly a statement from Downing Street can do without the hint that no other country is doing more than Great Britain, as if the relevance of one's own role as helping is just as important as the aid itself. While Johnson was walking around Kiev accepting gifts, the head of the British Red Cross appeared on the local BBC and rightly complained about the British government's shameful treatment of the refugees. The United Kingdom is the only European country that requires a visa for refugees from Ukraine. It is astonishing that Johnson's ministers do not hear the cynicism of their words when they emphasize, as they did again this weekend, that the process has already been simplified specifically for these refugees. It is no longer necessary to appear in person for an appointment. Ukrainians could fill out visa application forms online instead. Simply opening the borders to people from other countries would contradict the policy of Johnson's Brexit government. Expressed in numbers, this means that around 41,000 visa applications from Ukraine were approved in the kingdom by the end of last week. Germany alone has officially taken in more than 300,000 refugees from Ukraine, and unofficially there are many more. Boris Johnson's quality, talking to people and selling messages, is important in a crisis like this. And for Ukraine, it is a helpful and meaningful signal when Johnson personally travels to Kiev, like von der Leyen did a day earlier. But the videos and headlines must not obscure the whole truth. A few days ago, Moscow admitted that it had suffered significant losses in Ukraine. According to British Secret Services, the decimated associations are now to be refreshed with former soldiers. Accordingly, the Kremlin is also recruiting in the separatist region of Transnistria. According to British findings, Russia is trying to compensate for its increasing losses of soldiers in the Ukraine war by using former military employees. The Russian armed forces are looking to bolster their troop levels with personnel who have retired from military service over the past decade. The UK MOD said this in its regular intelligence update. Efforts to gain more combat capability include trying to recruit forces in the Russian separatist-controlled Transnistria region of Moldova. It is unclear how many Russian soldiers have been killed since the invasion of Ukraine began on February 24th. President Vladimir Putin's spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, admitted on Thursday to British broadcaster Sky News that Russia has suffered significant losses. According to the BBC, it is believed in the West that between 7,000 and 15,000 Russian soldiers have been killed so far. The Ministry of Defense had already announced on Sunday night that after the Russian withdrawal from northern Ukraine, there was evidence that people not involved in the fighting had been disproportionately targeted. There are mass graves, hostages have been misused as human shields, and civilian infrastructure has been mined, the ministry wrote. Russian forces continue to use IEDs to inflict casualties on Ukraine, lower morale, and limit Ukrainian movement. In addition, the troops continue to attack infrastructure targets where the risk of harming the civilian population is high, such as the recent shelling of a nitric acid storage facility near Rubishne in the Donbas. And there is something I really want to say. You all know my opinion here about this war. You can see it here, you can see it in the bottom of every of my videos. Russia is the aggressor with an illegal war that's against every international law on earth, and there are a lot of war crimes committed there by the Russian side as well. But this is a war, so we always have to see both sides. And I don't want to let it happen that it goes too propagandry, or whatever you might call this, because it is a war. There are soldiers on both sides in extreme situations, and I'm absolutely sure that even the Ukrainian side is not doing everything according to the law. And we have to keep that in mind. In the end, there will be people on that side as well that need to face a court. And that's why I always say, when we get reports, and you know that I get the reports via the big press agencies, and especially the German press agency. And many times when I talk about, we hear from that side this, we hear from that side that I always say, if there is an independent report on that one, if it could be verified independently. And I really want to stay on that path. There's a lot being said by the Russians where independent sources quickly could say, no, it's not. But there are also things published by the Ukrainian side that cannot be verified independently. And we all have to deal with information very carefully at the moment. There's tons of propaganda out here. But there's definitely a situation that is quite clear, which means there's one aggressor and one side defending. But on the smaller pieces, we always need verification from independent sources to know the truth about something. And we must not just one-sidedly glorify anything. The Russian side, the Russian government is the bad guys here. But in the end, we will see trials for people from both sides. And I'm not very sure if I brought it over very understandably, because it's such a problematic topic. But I want to make sure that people keep that in mind. This is a war, and the first thing in a war usually is the truth, and the second thing is humane behavior by people involved there. And we have to try to stay away from propaganda in our own minds as much as we can. And so I tried to put it in a certain perspective with this video. I know it is a difficult thing, but we all have to keep this in the back of our mind when we hear things about the war, especially with some PR stunts of some politicians here. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.